offers programs that help you fulfill your dreams and desires. For more information and to get your free copy of the Festa della Donna Retreat Self-Care Guide, visit fdbwomen.com.
What if your training isn't enough? The Multicultural Mindset Podcast invites counselors and therapists to unlearn the one-size-fits-all approach. This isn't cultural competence. It's a way of being that brings racialized experiences from the margins to the very center of care. Let's stop pathologizing Black pain and start challenging the system that created the bias in the first place. Visit newseasons.training to subscribe.
Welcome to Our Soul Whisper with Kathy Belmont and co-host Dr. Pat, a sacred space for self-discovery, healing, and transformation. At the heart of Our Soul Whisper is a sacred truth. When we pause and listen inward, the soul always speaks. This show offers a safe, empowering space where those whispers are heard, honored, and lovingly guided into full expression. Each episode invites you to be curious about yourself and the reality you're in, while gently reminding you that you are exactly where you need to be. Let today's message settle in your heart. Maybe even journal about it. And if something resonates, peace, clarity, or insight, pass it along to someone whose soul might be calling for the same. Keep listening inward. Your soul knows the way. Our Soul Whisper starts now. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Pat. I want to welcome you to an incredible show and a fabulous episode. I get to take this journey with the one and only Kathy Belmont, but more importantly, I want to tell you a little bit about today's episode. The episode is called Self-Trust Beyond Certainty, One Step at a Time. Now, I'm not exactly sure how Kathy comes up with these topics or the timing of what they are about, but today's episode is to focus on what's possible today in the moment, while inviting small and aligned choices that build trust and cultivate compassion. And I want to tell you, Kathy, in the past couple of days that I've been doing shows, I've done more shows on trust than imaginable. But I want to ask you before we get into the depth of this, you've created Soul Whisper, Our Soul Whisper, and this is a holistic coaching and integration offering that you have. I want to call it a service. It is the thing that helps people into the point of self-discovery, but also in that self-discovery, it helps people align with that next right action to take. And I want to make the connection before we dive deep in here. Why do we trust? So if you think about it, we are humans, and all other species have one thing in common with us, probably more. We have to do something. Now, if you think about that, it doesn't matter whether you're a four-legged, whether you're winged, whether you're two-legged, even from the very moment you are born, you breathe.
Yeah.
But what is it about breathing? You wake up in the day and you never say to yourself as an infant, should I trust to breathe? So let's get at it and start with the first part of the conversation about self-trust. What is self-trust when we think about this, Kathy? And thank you for picking this topic today.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you, and hello, everyone, listeners, and forgive me for my voice this morning, just getting over a cold. Dr. Pat, you actually mentioned before, a week ago, you said, self-trust would be an awesome episode when we looked at losing yourself, love beyond losing yourself. And so I said, it is a great topic. And so it's really a microcosm of what we talked about last week, and really wanted to talk about that willingness to be the beginner in your life, that one step at a time, and giving yourself permission to take those steps without knowing what's going to happen, knowing following that inner truth, that guidance, knowing, I know this is right for me and I don't know where it's going to go. And then nurturing and fostering that relationship with ourselves really starts there. And so, when we talk about the willingness to be a beginner, I wanted to share a story. Growing up, I didn't learn much about boundaries. And I learned pretty quickly that the way of my relating socially wasn't really working out. So I had to go back to the beginning and say, what are boundaries and why are they important in our lives? And how can I go about setting boundaries? And as I did that, just as importantly, I learned how to respect the boundaries of others, which always got me into trouble. And so it was going back to the beginning. And I love this metaphor of a barge. We're on this barge and we're going in a certain way. And we say, you know what, I got to switch directions here. And barges don't turn around quickly. They take a while. And so you're slowly turning, and all of a sudden you're in this new direction. You're charting these new waters. You've got a new map in front of you. You're at the beginning. And it can be an exciting beginning, but I think it's that willingness to take those steps. And that's where the beyond the certainty comes in, because we know we want to take that step and that action, and yet we don't know where it's going. And in that moment, that's where that self-trust is, and saying, gosh, that worked out great. So it's just those small steps that really help us to get there. And that's where the coaching really takes you, is it's honoring where you are today, and it's taking those steps. What can you do today? What would you like to do this week or next week to get you towards that goal that you said you wanted to achieve? So,
it's interesting because, the journey, self-trust sounds like such a simple thing. And yet, when you even hear the most, what's the right word I'm looking for? The most experienced teachers, let's call them, in the world, whether it's the Dalai Lama or some teacher of the past or somebody that's walked the earth that you quote now, right? Like the be the change you want to see in the world. That came from somebody that was like, oh my goodness, I am not in a good place. I need to step up and take care and trust. And yet we're surrounded by what you talked about, the temptation of other aspects of our humanity. Right?
Yeah.
I've done more shows on doubt, I think, than anything. But I'd like for you to talk about what self-trust allows us to do, because what's the opposite of self-trust? Self-fear.
Yeah, or doubt.
Right?
Yeah,
Or doubt.
Exactly. Yeah. Comes down to fear, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, it does. But what does it allow us to do that is so important to do, especially if you're in the world and you're so worried about other people and what they think?
Yeah. It's that willingness to just change course, to change our minds. And I think one of the important things that I got in touch with, especially, researching and writing this episode, is that we're constantly changing, whether we know it or not. A lot of times we can be very intentional. I'm going to change this in my life. I'm going to reach this goal. Other times maybe not. But I think as creatures, as humans, we're constantly changing. And I believe there's a life force always supporting us and moving us forward, whether we know it or not. Getting back on topic, I think it's important to realize that we're always changing, and to allow us to say, yeah, I need to change my mind here. I used to say yes to going to this place, and now it's like, it just doesn't resonate with me anymore. And to be able to communicate that to people and say, it's just not there, or, not seeing it as a failure of, committing or saying yes to something and then changing your mind. And I think it's keeping in mind that you're always evolving and changing, and it's moving with that current truth that you're in, and being able to be aware and to recognize that. And I think people, as you communicate that, I think people can respect that. And it also goes back to what we talked a lot about too, is that allows people permission to do that in their lives.
Yeah.
So we're all teachers and students here.
Yeah, it is. What I have found is it's extremely difficult to explain myself. So I decided 2 days ago that I was going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did I get to that place? Well, first of all, I feel really impacted by this being a 1 year. Still, we have a couple of weeks left to shed things of our past. But I found myself looking back. And when I was younger, I did exactly what you said. But even as I grew to go back to school, I still trusted myself so much so I fought to study the topic I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think from where you sit, the people you coach, right? Because this is not just a conversation,
Yeah.
but we're afraid.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you feel so strongly about a change, I woke up this morning and I reread a letter that we're sending out, and I looked at it and I said, it doesn't sound like me. It's not
Mm-hmm.
me. It's not what I want to say today.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean when I first wrote it and approved it, I wasn't at that place. But
Right.
something shifted in 2 days. So can you talk a little bit about what we need to do to reframe self-trust and what we need to do to be willing to change our mind despite the battlefield that's out there?
Yeah. 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 It's honoring that place we are. And a lot of what is I do in coaching, especially with the spiritual focus, is it's getting clear on where you are and what's important to you and what's behind that fear. And a lot of times it's that space of just talking it through and being able to listen to what you're saying and getting in touch with what's really important. And it's really taking those, it's allowing yourself to release that baggage of those missteps or those mistakes. You can see my fingers with the quotes. Um, you know, to allow ourselves that compassion to do that. And I think it's more of it's getting into that mindset and the awareness of allowing ourselves and self-trust, it's a big word. And it goes back to that one step at a time. And it took me to, the recovery world of one day at a time. And it's
Yeah.
really, I saw a lot of similarities between that and what I'm doing as a coach. And I think about, I grew up in an environment of addiction and recovery. And so I have come to appreciate that one step
Yeah.
and that one day and getting the support and to be able to, it's so important to a lot of where I go with clients is, remember a time where it all worked out and look how far you've come. Where were you at the beginning of this place and where are you now?
Yeah.
To really get in touch with that, because I think we don't take the time to do that. And that can really reframe things. That can get us to, wow, I really did that. And can give us that courage and the hope to move on. So I say that I've been in training all my life for
Yeah.
this. So it's a beautiful process if we allow it, but it takes those steps.
I really love that you brought up the 12 steps because last night I just had to stop and reflect. It was very late at night, and I pulled out my fourth step inventory sheet.
Mhm.
And for those of you that are wondering about what that is, it's one of the most difficult things you'll ever have to do to face yourself and discover yourself and then trust yourself. But one of the things that is so important in this is self-trust from where you're coming from is so important if you're going to change. And as a coach, Kathy, that's
Mhm.
got to be pivotal in terms of what you work with people. Because if
Yeah.
you don't trust yourself, And may I say, trust your thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that could go sideways. And let's talk about it. I I became unwilling to change my mind because of fear of failure, but I'm off of that kick now. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't change our mind. Even though what we're feeling it in our gut, we lose our relationship with self-trust, don't we?
We do because we don't, I think it really goes back to, getting clear on what's important to us, and it's going back to our values. And, I can relate to being in situations where I'm in a group setting and we're talking and it turns a little gossipy. And that's not one of my values. I don't believe in that. I can find myself dipping my toe in that. And one of the things that I do to really bring myself back from that is to say, okay, yeah, I gave up a part of myself here. And I think even to that step, Dr. Pat, it just takes those small steps that we talked about. That could be a big leap of awareness. We can be in that space and be going along and maybe feel something's off, but not know what it is. So again, bringing that awareness is, gosh, so important. And then taking it to, yeah, there was a part of me that I just wanted to feel included. I just wanted to be a part of it. And then to further inquire and say, what part of me is feeling disconnected that I really need to work with, which goes back to the integration work. So it all kind of comes together in all different directions. But I think it's
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, it's just taking that step and I guess learning to be present. I mean, not too long ago, you talked earlier, Dr. Pat, about in this episode that we have all these big words, and I had to get myself to say, well, what does being present really mean? And so it's just, again, going back to those basics and being willing to do that for yourself. Say, do I really understand this? I hear it all the time, but what the heck does it mean to be present? So.
I'm going back and reading some things, and I didn't bring any of my books with me when I moved. OMG. I was talking to Linda last night, and so this is a self-trust example. So
Yeah.
I started to doubt myself. And I'm telling you, if you'd have been a fly on the wall, Linda just listened to me. I said, you know what were we thinking by not putting this in the car or not doing this or not? I went through this list because what I miss most are I took all of the books that helped me become spiritually open and really find those guiding principles. I put them in a box and I didn't bring them. And to replace those books would cost a lot of money. So I'm starting to remember what I read, and now I have to read them again on Kindle or actually buy them.
Mm-hmm.
But now what I'm realizing is so many of them are about self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And, I was reading one of the books, and I read books from all sorts of philosophy, spiritual, Christian, Buddhist. I read them all, right? I get calls
Mm-hmm.
from people. They're like, what's that statue behind you? I thought you were dot, dot, dot. What is that woman? Well, hello, folks. That's Kuan Yin. And so I was reading something from Joyce Meyer. One of her best books that ever came out was called Battlefield of the Mind.
Mm-hmm.
See, Battlefield of the Mind. The mind is the number one thing that will take you off your self-trust game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not you, not me, not people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being conscious of what we're feeding ourselves. It's being conscious of those thoughts. Um, what are we saying to ourselves? And just being fully present and conscious of that. Of course. And that's one of the things where coaching can really assist too, is because we get in our minds and we don't know how to get out. And so having that different perspective and the space to share what needs to be shared and then have a coach reflect back to you what you say, that can be powerful in itself. Oh my gosh, am I really saying that to myself? And so it's just
Let's talk
building
about
that.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. because you're a coach.
Mhm.
Now, let's pause for a minute. How do people work with you? What is the best way for them to connect with you, ask you questions? And I know you do these free discovery calls. So let's make sure people could connect.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that somebody quoted me the other day is a book I haven't read. And it's a book by Elizabeth April. And it's
Mm.
called Your Anxiety is Giving Me Anxiety. Okay. Why? Because I'm trying to do it alone, Kathy. I'm
Yeah.
not working with you. I don't work with my coach. I have coaches, but I am not going to be able to progress without help. So, how do you help people through this? And what is the best way for them to get your help?
Yeah, I mean, it's just oursoulwhisper.com. It's the best way to reach me. And it's through that discovery call. We have a consultation to really meet and to get to know each other. And it's that discovery call too that really gets into the meat of what's important to you. And you can really get a taste of where it's going. And the coaching doesn't start for, even a couple sessions after that. There's some things to set up. But it's really that discovery and setting your goals, which doesn't sound as goaly as you might think, but it's setting that foundation for yourself. It's setting up that groundwork and that foundation and getting in touch with what's really important to you. That's really the key, really getting to it. And then the sessions are your own. I follow you in your direction and where you'd like to go. And I support you in my training and my knowledge and, you know, what I think can best evoke that awareness and within you and that will help you grow. So it's a partnership, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
It
I
really
mean,
is.
it's a relationship, and I want to be clear
It's a
about that.
relationship.
Yeah. Can
Mhm.
you talk about that for a minute? Because when we say self-trust is a relationship, it's very important. It means, hello, listening to your gut. I told you
Yeah,
this morning, I knew I would wake up. I knew I had something in my gut, and I knew that I would not be a couple people's favorite person today because of what I did.
yeah,
But that
yeah,
was only in my mind,
yeah,
right? But my gut told me A, B, C, D. Talk about instincts, intuition. What happens when we follow them and what happens when we don't?
yeah. And I'll share a quick story with the listeners that before I get into that with this cold, I was hoping to get to a point with, okay, Wednesday's coming, I'm good as gold. And I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning this morning and I'm thinking, oh dear. And so I texted Dr. Pat and I said, Dr. Pat, I may need some help here. And as soon as I released that and communicated that, I felt so much lighter. It was I felt so much relief and I have faith and trust in you. And so it just allowed me to just relax. And so just to kind of dig into that, that was an example where I listened to my message. Luckily, hopefully you turned your phone off at 2 o'clock in the morning. But
No,
anyway,
I actually was up because no, I'm not kidding. Remember, I told you I stayed up last night and I had to do
yeah,
that fourth step. And
yeah,
we should actually do a show and talk about what that fourth step is. But
sure.
no, I got your
Sure.
message.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know
And
what I
so,
didn't do? I didn't panic about it
yeah,
because I
yeah,
had prepared.
yeah.
And I thought, isn't this interesting, Pat? The episode's on self-trust. So are you going to do that tonight or are you going to stay up and obsess?
Yeah, yeah.
I
It,
didn't
it's
obsess.
I'm glad, and I'm glad, and we're holding strong, Dr. Pat. We're holding
We
strong.
are. We
So
are.
it's really it's listening to our guts, and it's that trial and error. And I loved this idea of seeing these messages we get, whatever we want to call them, however we want to experience them, as information. And sometimes we listen to it, and sometimes we don't. And to really, what does it feel like when you receive something that hey, this would be a good thing to check on, and you don't? What does that feel like? Okay, yep, I could have done that. And what does it feel like when we do follow that message, that instinct? Wow, where does that take us? So to really allow yourself to see it as information and have some fun with it.
I think as we learn about ourselves and how we learn about how we receive this information, it can be so much fun. I recognize things, I see synchronicities, and it's just so much fun to be able to be in alignment with where I'm going. So, and it's another part of this relationship is to follow through, with yourself. And it's to really, like in the example of, being in a situation where you're against your values, coming back to yourself and saying, yeah, I don't want to do that again. And really supporting yourself and being your own advocate in your own growth.
Yeah.
And then being compassionate with yourself along the way.
That is like the key right there.
That
right there
Yeah.
is so important, because you may have to change your mind. You may have to do things differently. One of these other quotes from this book I was reading was, you can't have a positive life and a negative mind.
Mm-hmm.
They can't coexist.
Yeah.
And part of that is to trust everything you've said about what it is inside of you that's helping guide you. And somebody said to me a long time ago, when spirit operates, it doesn't crack an egg over your head.
Right.
It doesn't give you bad news. So I'd love for you to just, please, thank you for today. Thank you for the message. What do you want to leave us with? And again, how can people get in touch with you and work with you?
Yeah, I'll say that first, and then I'd like to leave the listeners with a couple of things to think about. So oursoulwhisper.com, love to connect with you. And I'd love to just leave you all with, what would it look like to trust yourself just a little bit more today? And just think of one step that you could take that feels true and honors who you are to assist you with that. And then I think the big one is just allow that to be enough for today. Just allow that to be enough.
So I'm not going to blame you, but I will say this. Your text message that I got, that I read, caused me to get a hit, a download about an email we were sending out. And I realized in my gut that I have to trust what I want to say and say it the way I want to say it, and not worry about how it's going to land or where it's going to go. And it caused me later this morning to wake up and just sit in quiet and ask myself, what do you want to say and how do you want to say it?
Yeah.
That alone, that text message from you has got me to rethink about 6 different things today. So thank you, Kathy Belmont.
Oh, well, and thank you. Thank you for partnering me and carrying me a little bit through this episode. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the listeners.
For all of you out there, you've heard us talk about this thing about. Thank you for listening to Our Soul Whisper with Kathy and Dr. Pat. Tune in every first and third Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Take a moment now to breathe in and reflect on today's message. If it brought you peace, clarity, or insight, let it settle in your heart and maybe even journal about it. Remember to like and share this episode with someone who's ready to listen within. May our soulful echoes ripple outward, awakening awareness and deep remembrance. If this show touched something within you, share it. Let's create a world where most of us pause, listen inward, and allow our light to shine. Visit OurSoulWhisper.com for more.